Let me pass Matt, it's on here, we have a sheet of paper, several that can be handed out that have the QR code for the survey. Right, good morning, everybody, welcome. My name is Peter Lujan, and as part of the Blue Sky Consulting Group and county team from Supervisor Linda Hopkins' office, welcome to the second workshop of the governance study process, workshop, excuse me, of the governance study. We had our first workshop on February the 4th. We had over 100 people here. For those of you coming again, thank you again for returning. We really value your participation here. And I'd like to add, for those of you who are part of organizations that have memberships that are tracking this study, please know that there will be a parallel workshop set of questions on the website for those who couldn't attend today. So please encourage your memberships to see an email after this the coming week, and they can participate as well and give their feedback. With that, I want to just briefly say what today's objective is and review the agenda. Our key objective is to get into what a governance solution is and what services can be improved by these governance solutions. At the first workshop, we gathered, and online, we gathered your ideas about, or not ideas, but your insights into what are the highest needs and priorities for the region. And now we're coming back with looking at, well, how do those needs that you identify, how could they be best addressed in different ways? And the key highlight today is to look at how a new governance solution could address some of these. And then we want to look at which governance solution would be most compatible, most appropriate, most workable and feasible in the region. We will break into small groups after a presentation from Supervisor Hopkins and from Matt Newman from Blue Sky, and really talking about what it requires to implement some of these governance solutions. We're then going to break into small groups so we have a chance to have a more, more sort of in-depth Q&A and discussion, so that we all can learn a little bit more about what it would take to implement some of these in the region. And we'll come back as a full group, and we have online, on the screen, we'll have some survey questions that we'll ask for your preferences based on what we learned in the small groups and in the presentations. Briefly about the process, sort of phase one was where we gathered your ideas online, the workshop, and we organized that information to start to, again, understand how it could be addressed. The second phase is where we're at now, where we want to come back to you what we learned and discuss potential solutions. And then in early fall, we'll come back with recommendations at a third workshop to hear your feedback on what you think is viable here. And just briefly, for those of you who weren't here, we had a great workshop in early February, about 120 plus people. And the key themes that were discussed was public safety, healthcare, which covers a number of topics, and services, a broad category of a lot of quality of life issues, art, beautification of streets, education, bilingual support issues. Then infrastructure was a major topic around roads, around safety, mental health care, and finally services for youth was another large umbrella. category of topics expressed. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Supervisor Hopkins to see how we work with it.
Thank you so much. And I really want to start by saying thanks to all of you for dedicating your Saturday morning to what sounds like a very unsexy topic, right? Governance solutions. It sounds like as exciting as peeling paint. And yet, as we saw at our last workshop, this is really how do we meet the needs long-term in the community? Needs that often get left unaddressed when you only have one representative, and no matter how hard I fight for you, I still need at least 2 other votes of the Board of Supervisors to get anything done. And so ultimately, your needs are really subject to a board. 4 out of 5 of the people on that board, you don't get to vote for, right? You don't get to cast a vote. And so it's sort of a structural disempowerment that I think for so long has led to an underinvestment in Western Sonoma County. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of the things that we could do. I want to share that during budget hearings, I was able to secure $4 million for infrastructure investments in Western Sonoma County. And that's on top of, there we go, exciting. And so I actually want to, even though that's a parallel process, listen to what all of you have to say in the room today and what you all said in the meeting last time to help guide those investments. And we also have an additional $1 million from last year's round of budget hearings that we're still wanting to work with the community on those investments. But you know what? One-time solutions are really band-aids, right? That's not an ongoing source of funding that's going to meet the ongoing needs for recreational amenities, increased public safety, roads, mental health services, some of those things that we discussed at the last meeting. So the question then becomes, how do we best address those needs in the future? The county is working to address those needs, but again, the county is pulled in 5 different directions by 5 different members of the Board of Supervisors. So that's really why I am very keenly interested in working with all of you to lift up the community voice, so that I hear you, but also so that all of my colleagues and all of the department heads working in county government also hear you and want to work for you and meet the needs out here in West County. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to look at governance solutions, where you could actually potentially take back some of the authority of the county government, or sort of add some, authority or return to source funding into our community, so that it's not just me arm wrestling during budget hearings, but there's actually money that the community has at their disposal to meet the needs that we discussed at the last meeting. One thing that I do want to mention is that whatever the outcome of the governance study is, the county's not going away. Specifically, even inside city limits, the county still holds the jurisdictional authority and the responsibility over health and human services. So, some of the sort of needs that we see out in West County will still need to be met by county government going forward, or they might require a more regional response that's not even Lower Russian River specific. So some of the things that fall under that category: mental health services, substance use services, transportation, transit, food insecurity, lack of healthcare resources, and things like teen health programs. So those are unlikely to be solved just by the Lower Russian River coming together and determining an independent governance solution. We're still going to need to work with county government and also with our fantastic nonprofit service provider, which we've got some representatives here today, our wonderful organizations like West County Community Services and West County Health Centers, who provide critical health and human services out in Western Sonoma County. So with that, I am actually going to hand it over to Matt to discuss in more detail governance solution. But again, thank you so much for the gift of your time this morning. And it's really our goal to listen deeply to you today and to have that guide the solutions that we come back with at the next meeting.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming today. As Linda alluded to, what we're talking about today, a governance solution, sounds a bit dry and technical, and in some ways it is, but providing information to all of you so you can make informed decisions about the future of this region is a very important part of this process. And so today we're going to go through a little bit of an explanation of what a governance solution is and what the various types of governance solutions might be and the pros and cons of those. And then we'll break up into groups, and that's a chance for all of you to really ask questions of the group leaders or write down questions that the group leaders can't answer and then present them back to the study team. And we'll make sure that all those questions that you have get answered, because that's really the most important purpose of today, is to make sure that the questions that you have can be answered through this study process. So a governance solution in a nutshell is simply a change in the kind of government that delivers a service. So if you live in the unincorporated county right now, then the county is the deliverer of all the services that you might benefit from. But if the region were to take over a service of its own, for example, to form a fire district, then fire services would be performed by a fire district and not by the county anymore. And that would be a governance solution. It's just a change in the kind of government that delivers a service. So currently, there's really four kinds of local governments that deliver services. The sort of smallest unit of government is called a special district. It's a special purpose local government. It's got a board that's elected just like a city council or a board of supervisors, but it just delivers a single service. It delivers fire services or wastewater treatment or park and recreation services, just one thing. It can be funded by property taxes, or it can collect fees or do both of those things, but it has a relatively narrow function. The next kind of level is something called a community services district. It's just a special district that delivers more than one service. That's really the only distinction. And so a community services district can do a broader range of things because it can address a range of needs, but it still has a locally elected board that governs its operations. It can take a slice of the property tax. It could raise a new tax if the voters approved it. It could charge fees for the services it delivers, or all of those things. Lastly, there's cities. Everyone, I think, knows what a city is, but a city is different from special districts and community services districts because cities are what's called a general purpose government. So they can deliver a broader range of services even than a community services district. And importantly, cities can have control over land use, which community services districts and special districts cannot. So cities get to decide what gets built and how rapidly a community grows or doesn't grow. And that's a very important distinction between a city and a community services district. Lastly, there's the county, which everyone knows about, and as Supervisor Hopkins mentioned, some services are delivered by the county on a countywide basis. So the county provides mental health services, and it provides prosecution, and through the district attorney, the assessor collects property taxes. These are all countywide functions that, regardless of whether you live in a city or your fire is provided by a special district or any other arrangement, there's countywide functions. But if you're not in a city and you're not served by a special district, then the county is the provider of those services. So just to give you an idea of the entities that are currently serving the Lower Russian River region, there's obviously Sonoma County. There's something called the Lower Russian River MAC, or the Municipal Advisory Council. Many of you may be familiar with this, but this is a group that is advisory to the Board of Supervisors. So its job is to be closer to the community, hear what the community's needs and concerns are, and make recommendations back up to the Board of Supervisors about what things the community needs. But it's simply advisory, so it's not able to vote or allocate revenues. There's the Lower Russian River Wastewater Citizens Advisory Council. Casanero has something as a community services district, which delivers multiple services. Forestville Water District, Sonoma Fire, et cetera. So these are the districts that are currently, some of the districts that are currently serving the region. Okay, so Supervisor Hopkins talked a bit about the kinds of things, and as did I, that the county will continue to do. But many of the things that were raised at the first community workshop and through the engagement process with our online survey were things that can be addressed with a governance solution. So this is a list of some of the things that were identified that are subject to a governance solution. The top three here, the ones highlighted in green, are things that could only be addressed by incorporating, by becoming a city, because they involve land use. So obviously land use is land use, building permits and zoning, these are the main things that cities get to do, or that the county gets to do if you're not in a city, to control what gets built and where, and how responsive the building department is to permit applications and so on. Vacation rentals are also a land use function which the Board of Supervisors currently controls, and if you live in a city, which is subject to city control. And then affordable housing is really under city control, mostly in the following way. By controlling land use, cities get to decide, can we have apartment buildings? Can we have multifamily housing? Can we have tiny houses? Can we have more of the kinds of housing that are affordable or not? So that's how cities or the county get to control land use and impact the price of housing. But other things that are subject to a governance solution are public safety, roads and public works, parks and services for youth, trash and restrooms and streetscape improvements, which I know is a big issue here in Guerneville. Emergency services, lack of cell and broadband service, economic development, and wastewater. These are all things that could be addressed through a governance solution. Okay, so let's talk about what the governance solutions are. We've tried to kind of break this down into 4 categories, although they're not mutually exclusive, and the community could well decide to do many of these things or more than one of these things. The first one is strengthening existing institutions. This probably makes sense no matter what, right? If we have institutions that are serving the region, helping them to be stronger and as effective as possible makes a lot of sense. So some of the ideas that have come up are enhance the MAC, the Municipal Advisory Council, in some fashion. For example, we could request that the Board of Supervisors give the MAC a budget and make recommendations about how that budget is to be spent. Now, the MAC can't make a decision because it's not an elected body like the board is, but it could advise the board, we want this $100,000 to be spent here, and that would be a way to enhance the MAC. Another thing you might do is you could create a Lower Russian River Council of Governments. So I showed you the list before of all the special districts that are serving the region. There's also cities here that are neighbors and the county, and those governmental entities don't talk to each other as much as they might, but other regions have formed a council of governments. So all the local governments get together quarterly and talk about issues of mutual concern. Another thing that you could do short of forming a special district is you could form a special taxing district. And this is something that they did in West Marin, where the voters there voted to tax vacation rentals at a little extra rate. They didn't have to go through all of the work of forming a special district, but the revenue that's generated is collected by the county. They handle all the administrative functions, and an advisory group from Western Marin tells the board of supervisors, this is how we want the money to be spent. So you didn't have to form a new district, but there's extra control over how some additional resources are spent, and they're targeted and spent only in the region where the extra taxes are collected. Another thing you could do, I'm just gonna go back here, sorry, Peter, is you could expand or consolidate existing special districts. So you don't necessarily have to create a new one. Creating a special district it requires some effort. And it requires some capabilities. You have to have a capable manager. You have to have a board that's elected and people on that board who are going to make good decisions. You have to collect your tax revenue and spend it, and there's reporting requirements. You usually have to have a lawyer on contract to ask legal questions. These are all kind of administrative overhead things. And if you expand an existing special district, you don't necessarily have to double those efforts, even if the district's twice as big. Those things are sort of fixed costs, and a bigger district can therefore use more of its resources on delivering services and spend less on its administrative overhead. So consolidating or expanding an existing special district is a way to be a bit more efficient in the way services are delivered. You can also create a new special district, of course, or a new community services district. And to do that, there's a process which is a bit complicated, but basically involves the community getting organized, raising a bit of money, collecting signatures for a petition, and then submitting an application to something called the LAFCO, which is the Local Agency Formation Commission, which is just an entity of government that helps decide what reasonable boundary changes are, or if a new incorporation or a new district formation is going to be viable. So that's the process that you go through, and this new district can deliver more services than the current special districts are delivering. So, for example, the region could say, we want to form a community services district, and we want that district to do region-wide park and rec services, downtown street improvements in the Guerneville and other downtown areas, and public safety, and take over the public safety function from the county. Now, the county would have to agree to such a thing, but a community services district could take existing resources that are spent on public safety, collect them and form its own police department and deliver public safety services in the community as well. The last thing is municipal incorporation. So this means becoming a new city, and it is the thing that takes the most effort and also requires the most, comes with the most risk from the community, because you're responsible for your own destiny if you're taking over these functions. That's kind of the trade-off, right? Is right now the county controls your destiny. More local control means more decision-making locally, but also more risk, because if something goes wrong, that's on the community to take care of itself or raise additional resources or figure out how to solve a problem, whereas the county might take that responsibility now. So that's kind of the range of solutions. As I've been discussing, these solutions, kind of come on a continuum. And the farther to the right you go from strengthening existing institutions to forming a new city, the more local control you have, right? If you're a city, you control everything basically. But it also takes more effort. You'd have to raise more money. You'd have to work harder to persuade the community that this is something you would need to do. And it would take a longer campaign and it's a higher bar to cross with the LAFCO and a harder negotiation with the county about how much resources would come back to the community. The other important thing to know about forming a new city is that it's become very difficult because of a change in state law that happened in 2011. Once upon a time, the state gave new cities a little extra money from something called the vehicle license fee to help fund the costs of becoming a new city. And when the law changed in 2011, that extra revenue stream to help new cities went away. And as a result, there has been no new municipal incorporation since 2011. So it's very difficult for a new city to form right now unless the legislature changes the law. That's not to say it's impossible, but it means it's quite difficult. So more local control as you move to the right on these things, also more community effort, and then more risk, right? If you've probably heard stories of local governments going bankrupt, of local officials being corrupt, of natural disasters or recessions happening that devastate local economies and the ability of local governments to deliver services. Those are things that are risks that a community takes when it forms a new district or becomes a new city. And that's the price, if you will, that's paid for the additional local control. The last thing to say about this is that none of these solutions necessarily come with additional resources. These things involve a transfer of resources from the entity that's currently delivering the services to the new entity. So if the community says, we want to form a community services district, we want to take over law enforcement, a negotiation would happen with the county. The money the county is currently spending on that function would be transferred to this new community services district or city. And that amount of money would now be spent locally with local control, but it's not necessarily an enhanced level of revenues. However, any of these entities can also vote to create an extra tax or charge an additional fee, and that is a way of enhancing the amount of resources. But the transfer itself or the creation of a new district or entity itself doesn't necessarily increase the amount of revenue that comes. So now I want to hand our presentation over to someone who's got some experience with special district consolidation. She was involved in the consolidation with the Bodega Bay Fire District and can tell us a little bit more about what that looks like. So where's our guest? Here she comes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Liz Martin. I am the retired Board of Directors President of Bodega Bay Fire District. Retired is the key word. It was a long, arduous process to get consolidated with Sonoma County Fire, but it was a success. Did it happen overnight? No. It took 7 long, hard years of exploration, trying to get different entities, first of all, together to see if we could play well with each other. And I think with what you're expecting to do, that should be one of your first priorities, is the different entities that were shown up here, is you need to get them all on board on the same page, because it's going to be very difficult if you can't do that. Another thing is funds. You know, do you have a population base that can support the budget that the district needs? And that's where you go through and you decide what services you want to have. Mine was easy. It was just fire services. You guys are, I applaud you for what you're trying to do. That's very huge. I do know before Bodega Bay consolidated, the fire district consolidated with Sonoma County Fire, one of the first things we did as a community was looked at incorporating. It didn't work, where there was no way with the different land, excuse me, land use policies from Sonoma County. Let me back up. Bodega Bay is in a unique position. The generous land use policies that the county has taken 2/3 of the land masses that we have in the Bodega Bay community out of our tax base for one reason or another. It's state parks, local parks, Sonoma Land Trust, whatever it is, that takes the tax base away from your community and goes to them. So just be aware of that.
Could you speak just a little bit louder, please?
Sure. Is that better? Okay. Like I said, it took 7 long years. And hopefully Mark Branford's going to come up here and help bail me. This gentleman is Mark Branford. He is the commissioner of LAFCO. I suggest you get to know him very well, because he is going to be the instrument you need to get this through the process. One of the instruments that is going to come out of this is an MSR, Municipal Services Review. Depending on what type of district you go for, it has a set of criteria that you need to look at, and those questions need to be answered as far as whether or not the community can do that. And so that in itself is another process that you need to consider. I think for you, what I would suggest is going out to your constituents and getting them all on the same page. Because when you have the community come together and you've got this groundswell of support that comes up, and that's what it's going to take to get it through. I know in Bodega Bay, our community came together tremendously during our consolidation. And without the community support, we would not have been able to provide another ambulance before we consolidated. So now we've got 3 ambulances out here in West County. That was just one of the many good things that came out of that. The consolidation for our firefighters also gave them a cost of living raise. And it gave them career progression. Now I know that doesn't impact you, but that's what you want to look at here. Okay, how is this all going to bubble up? The first thing, again, you need to decide what services you want. Perhaps consolidating some of the water districts or the recreational side. That might be a good step forward to get those entities to start talking with each other so that they can possibly come on the same page and support the greater good. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So who leads
Repeat your question.
Because, there's no salary or, income for that person, so it's purely volunteer.
Yes, at this point, you're absolutely right. So you need to find someone with passion. The question was, who leads the parade, basically? You need to find someone with that passion. And that's one of the things as a district you're gonna need to look at. You're gonna need governance. How are you gonna fund that? Is it gonna be volunteer? In the fire district, it was, you could get stipends to come to meetings and such. I don't know what is available in the different types of districts. Yes.
What was the problem that made you want to consider consolidation? And why did you need to raise funds in order to effect the consolidation?
The Bodega Bay Fire District was. Okay, the question was, why did we have to, what were the issues in consolidating Bodega Bay? Why did we need to go out and raise more funds? The bottom line is, it costs money to consolidate. Bodega Bay, again, through the land use, et cetera, that we were constantly struggling with our budget year to year. We had the highest fire tax in Sonoma County of $524 a year, and the community decided that because they wanted to they knew how important it was to keep the ALS and the fire services out in Bodega Bay to support the coast. Is that, we were $3 million short. That's why we couldn't consolidate. So that was part of the 7-year process of going to different entities and working with the county to try to find the funds to do this so that we could consolidate. And last year, we, the county and us and Bodega Bay were very successful in doing that. We owe a lot to this lady here.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
No, one thing that I just want to add to what Liz said is that ultimately, the county actually general fund dollars closed the gap for consolidation. Because the county saw the benefit of having sustainable, effective, efficient fire services along the coast. And because what was really driving the fantastic leadership of Liz and Steve Hertzberg and other folks who were on the board, was that they felt the services were inadequate. Because they couldn't sleep well at night knowing that there was only one ambulance. If that ambulance was in Santa Rosa dropping off a patient, there was 0 people covering out in Bodega Bay. And so we really think the drive to do right by the citizens and the residents of Bodega Bay, that ultimately led to that. And I also want to mention that, it was the community rising up that got it across the finish line, but they had a bit of a, I guess, lack of advantage that you all have, right? Because we have these consultants on board to help explore all of the options and run the fiscal analysis. And it really came down to the Bodega Bay Fire Protection District Board and myself and the CAO trying to pull things together, which was much tougher, I think, than having resources and having an analysis and having a community engagement process. So I think that at least the lower, nothing's easy, but at least the Lower Russian River is starting out a bit ahead of the curve in terms of the community engagement process and the analysis being conducted, right? Because you all had to do that yourself, and we would be sending budgets back and forth between emails endlessly between our offices.
Yes, she's absolutely right. It got nuts sometimes. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, out of the Russian River, we have a couple of parks districts.
Why don't I run the microphone so I don't have to repeat? Okay.
I can do
So
that.
out on the Russian River, we have a couple of parks districts. I know Monterey and is it Russian River Parks or Granville Parks and District? Russian River. And Barstow needs one in essence, to fund things like our skate park. How would consolidating the parks districts in the Lower Russian River area solve some of the problems for all the park needs?
I'm actually looking at Mark Cranford in the back there for that question. He kind of gave this who, me?
So as part of the consolidation, you can also add territory to the district. Right, so you could consolidate those 2 districts and expand it at the same time as part of it. what we call as a term, part reorganization. So taking two districts, adding them together and potentially expanding them, we could, for example, take them up into Casaderos, they could take the part across from the fire station, right? So that's something that is all available to you in the map that you have in front of you.
And does the financial as well as logistics advantage, the way the Multnomah County Fire was financial as well as.
Yeah, we didn't hear
Yeah, so the question was, there was a financial advantage for, Bodega Bay Fire to go into Sonoma County Fire. The main hurdle you have to get through with LAFCO is to show that it's gonna work. So you have to show that you're gonna have the money to do what you think you want to do. That's really the hurdle. There's a secondary hurdle. LAFCO really goes out and makes sure that the people want it, right? So there is a process, a full process, either a flat out election, like a referendum to say, yes, it's gonna go, or we do what's called a protest proceeding. We let you tell us that we're doing it wrong.
And one thing that I just want to add, because this is something that I've heard from, Mark time and time again, when I served on LAFCO, is that, a lot of times you look at a map and it makes no sense. And so when you look at the lower Russian River and you see that you've got Monterey, Park and Rec, Russian River Rec and Park, and then 3 different nonprofits now in Forestville, all geared around managing open spaces. Like, does that make a whole heck of a lot of sense to have that kind of, redundancy? And that's a conversation that's been had a lot with the fire services. And, everybody has to basically invent their own wheel under that model, as opposed to having a little bit more efficiency or economy of scale. So, and yet there's also, people feel fiercely protective of their park district and their ownership and their community. And that's a conversation that we also have with fire services. And so how do you balance that need for unique community identity and independence with, hey, what's the sustainable financial future, for managing our parks for the next 30 years?
Thank you.
I'm good.
Okay.
So this is not so much a question as, we spent a lot of time on consolidating districts. But based upon the surveys that we've taken and the issues that we're facing with our town, this isn't really an apples to apples comparison. Like, consolidating our districts won't bring a police department. Right? Consolidating our districts won't focus on services and mental health, the issues that we face every day downtown Main Street. So I just want to just be clear that we spent a lot of time. It's amazing what you accomplish in a day, but it's the consolidation, like we spent this whole last half hour consolidating districts. I think the real thing is either community services group or corporation. This is really what's going to solve our problems in our small town, because we know what our problems are and we need to be our own government, right? There are very smart people in our community who believe. And so in CSDs or in corporation, I think is where we should be focusing our conversation. So thank you.
Those are 2 large words. Yes.
I'd like to just interrupt for one moment. We were going to do this in small session, but it feels about right within a minute here. Is it okay if we go ahead and we're naturally moving into what you want to know more about? And then also to hear your thoughts brought up on what services should be addressed. So we're thinking of staying in a large group. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Affirmative?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that,
Who's actually here?
oh, right. No, that is a great point. Let's do that. There's Matt, Blue Sky, there's Supervisor Hopkins, and no, I know. No, right. The gentleman from Africa, one more time, if you could introduce.
Mark Renton,
Jackie, were you asking who's in the audience?
The key resource, were you wondering if the key resource?
No, seriously, so I have a.
Sorry, I just-
Why don't I just run around with the microphone and say literally name and town? How's that? Because I think it's actually nice. I mean, the fact that we have a slightly smaller team, like we can all have this conversation as a group now, as opposed to breaking into small groups, but it does, I think, help to know who's in the room. But I think that Carmen had a question first, so let's.
Thank you, Linda. I have more of a statement relevant to what Brian just made a comment of about focusing on consolidation. and, what was it, community district? One of the things is, and I think it's great to look into that. I looked into it back in 1978 under the Simon incorporation process that we went through. But I think one of the things is that I'm looking at, in 1978, I was putting in about 10 hours worth of work, and whatever taxes and whatever new service costs came my way wasn't really a big deal. I was able to maintain it, yet not thinking about the makeup of our community at that time, which really had, where we really housed a lot of affordable housing before a lot of the sewer district came. We didn't have the sewer fee, which is now closing into 2000. My name is Herman J. Hernandez, and I live in Guerneville for 54 years. And one of the things is we didn't have a $2,000 a year sewer charge. And then going forward, I never had fire insurance that went up to 3 to 7 times the annual cost. I didn't have sewer, I didn't have flood that went from $2,100 to $10,600. So when we look at fixing this, one of the things I look at is, yeah, maybe we get the services slow. Yeah, maybe I have to be at the county 2 or 3 times a week. Not everybody can do that, but I'm over advocating. When many of our local residents told me I was wasting my time. But Linda's correct. You have 4 other supervisors you have to lobby. You have to advocate. And so my thing is, I'm here open-minded, but I'm sure the heck, looking at each individual community about what their needs are. You talk about our districts. I've been on the Park and Recreation here in Guerneville for 48 years. And I see that our income of 150,000 to 400,000 to try to maintain 2 major dams that support the economic backing of our community for the whole Russian River. I saw 2 new beaches come in, Sunset and Steelhead. They're jamming in with tourists. The whole community is packed. That's what we put why we put the dams in, was to support the economy of our Russian River. So I'm open-minded, but I'm not, when I look at incorporation and when I look at community district, what is the bottom line of the increasing amount of seniors or aging over 60 years old? And what is the makeup of our community of retired, of our workforce? I can tell you right now, insurance is going up. Our workforce that are looking for affordable housing, their rents are going up. I'm still open-minded, but these are all the things I'm thinking about this morning as we look at this. What are we fixing? What is totally broken? But we continue to get the services, we continue to pay. So now we look forward, but back in 78, look at what our tax bases were. Look what our costs were. Look at inflation today. And I'm saying, I'll do whatever the community, the majority of the community wants. But what I don't want is I don't want to see the underserved, our workforce having to cover a large portion. I don't want to see gentrification because of fire or flood in our community. And lastly, I'm not running for supervisor.
Thank you. Can I jump in here before we do the introductions? I feel like Patty's really critical question was not answered and has not been answered. And I think it's really, really important. What are the issues we're trying to solve? Now, one of the big issues is high costs, low service, and not enough control of the services. What are some of the reasons for high cost? One of the reasons is that we have, just as they had in Bodega Bay, we have little patchworks of organizations, all of which have to pay their own operational expenses. Basically, you don't have enough ratepayers in order to cover all the services that are needed. So by bringing it together, either in incorporation or in consolidations, putting more ratepayers in to be able to provide the services makes a better balance. That same issue is true in terms of leadership. How many of you are on 5 different committees? I know Herman's on 5 different committees, because there we have so many different organizations doing the same things. We have 4 different parks organizations in the city of Forestville. How big is Forestville? 4 different organizations, and each one of them has to have their own leadership, their own lawyers, their own costs. So we're too splintered. One great example of how that affects us is the trash on Main Street in Guerneville. Main Street in Guerneville is handled by Caltrans, and so Caltrans is supposed to pick up the trash. They do it sporadically and not very well. Therefore, the county has a contract with Recology, and Recology is supposed to pick up the trash. They do it sporadically and not very well. Therefore, we have a contract with a local organization, Trash Goals, that ends up picking up after the 2 big organizations that do it. Now, if we want to change anything with Caltrans, we have to have a local governance solution, because they will not do contracts with local organizations like a nonprofit, because nonprofits come and go. We don't have an organization, community service district or incorporated organization that can have a contract with Caltrans in order to take care of the trash issue. And when we had a contract with the Trash Goals in order to take care of the issue, Recology got upset because they had the county-wide contract, and they said we were breaking their contract. So this is a really good example of the issues we're trying to solve. We have too many organizations. We have too high costs. We have leadership that is splintered and taking on 5 different jobs. And we need to figure out how to bring those things together in order to more effectively pay for better service. That's what we're trying to solve. Does that answer your question a little better? Thanks.
Just a lightning round introduction, so I'll just bring the microphone by and just sort of state your name and town, and if you serve on any boards or commissions, or you run an agency in the organization, in the community, please mention that too. And I just want to say thank you so much to Herman for raising the issue of rising costs, because I think that is a fear of many people of, hey, you know, if we go for more services, is it then going to result in more property taxes, more sales taxes, more cost burden for residents? And I can say that it is my goal to not do that, right? And I actually think that we're generating a lot of revenue in the community that we are not retaining right now. It's kind of going into the general fund, into the 101 quarter, and that's why we hired Blue Sky to actually run that fiscal analysis. That fiscal analysis will come back at the next meeting. And in addition to what Elise said, just one more point on that, which is that the lack of centralization of authority leads to constant finger pointing between government agencies. How many of you have called one agency only to be told, oh, that's not my problem, you have to call somebody else, right? Pretty much everybody, right? Oh, that's not county public infrastructure, that's Caltrans, or that's the sheriff at CHP, or that's not CHP at the sheriff. Because I know that's actually regional parks rangers because it's on regional park property, right? It's insane, and it's so frustrating to all of you to constantly be guided around between different government agencies. All right, so we're gonna quickly do kind of name, and I'll start with Bernard.
Seth Miller, I'm with the Blue Sky team.
Betsy Van Dyke, I live in Guerneville. I'm currently serving in the Lower Russian River Mountain. Hi, Patty Taylor, Villa Grande, Lower Russian River Mountain.
Rich Homer, in Villa Grande since 1979. I'm on the boards of directors of the Sweetwater Springs Water District and Friends of Villa Grande. Also a LAFCO commissioner, and I serve on the Citizens Advisory Group for the Monterey Villa Grande wastewater issues. Excuse me, Michael McTaggart, I'm here with my wife from Montreal.
Marina McTaggart, Monterey Chamber of Commerce and Monterey Recreation and Park District.
Brenda Edelman, Russian River Watershed Protection Committee since the last 43 years. And also I'm on the CAG for the Monterey Sewer.
Beth Jacobstig is currently Forrestville representative of the Municipal Advisory Council for the Lower Russian River and now being involved in the unification study for school districts in what Lower West, Far West County and also fire safe councils.
Lisa Herbert, 23, resident of Gurnville.
Recently, I don't serve on any boards or anything, and I live in Montreal. I think I live in Montreal. Of course, other people will tell me I live in Occidental. And Google Maps can't figure out where I live, which is why they send everybody to my house to live on the transportation law. So.
My name's Craig Wilkinson and property owner in Gurnville, up in Catskill.
My name is Eva Williams and I live in Camino del Arroyo, Gurnville, and I serve on the board of Fire Safe Gurnville.
Just want you to know that we're taking notes of everyone who's not currently serving on boards, because we're
Jeanette Tillman, I lived here for more than 50 years and have been very involved in many of the issues. The fire, the hospital, the Palm Drive, the MAC, and I recently knew that I continue to be interested and want to see this through. Vicky Wilder, Land on the board of Friends of Land and Sweetwater Schools Board District.
Hi, Linda Prashant Disney, Occidental. On the Occidental Community Council, we have a new planning group and leading the governance portion and investigations.
Good morning, I'm Mike Nichols, I'm the MAC representative for Casadero, Cummings Mills. I serve on the Smoke Community Power Committee Advisory. County GMRS group, as president of the Casadero CFP. Chair of the Conduit nonprofit and Safety County.
Hi, I'm Tim Miller with West County Community Services and Russian River Road.
Herman J. Hernandez, I serve on the Russian River Park and Recreation District, Sonoma County Regional Parks Commission, also a member of Los Latino-led organizations in Sonoma County, and been a member of Russian River Rotary for 50 years.
Hola, buenos días. Soy la señora Gary, de parte de Cafecitos, colaborando para la comunidad donde vivo. Gracias. Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Sandra. Soy parte de Cafecitos también, para ayudar a la comunidad también.
And I'd like our fantastic translator to introduce herself. Hello, hola. It's a pleasure to be language bridge. And can you get around?
Hi everyone, this is Lupe. I'm the new field rep with the Office of Supervisor Applicant, and I'm also bilingual. Thank you all for being here.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Imelda Montaño y vivo aquí ya por 28 años o más en Forestville y en esta área. Y pues estoy aquí por parte de Cafecitos también.
I'm 28 years, and this lady is basically general part of.
They're part of the Cafecitos, and they represent here. They are in the business of helping their own community.
Hi, I'm Roberto Cedillo, and I'm the president of Friends of the Con for 2 weeks now.
My name is Carl Yeager. I live near Occidental on Occidental Road, and I'm very interested in this process.
I'm Kyla Brooke. I live in Villa Grande, which Google thinks is Monterey, so there's the post office, and nobody can figure out where I go to live, including UPS. I am on the board of directors of Friends of Villa Grande with Roberto, which we were the original members of that, and I am also on the Citizens Advisory Group for Wastewater Solutions.
Bill Time, Guerneville River Arts and Russian River Community Trust.
Hi, Sarah Rosen, currently living in Monterey. Melissa Frost, living in Monterey, next to my neighbor, and also a teacher here at Garfield School.
Hi, I'm Ryan Hughes. I'm with the Russian River Alliance, the Workforce Fund. So you're probably aware of the work we do with trying to help service industry people, service low-income workers who become homeless. I'm also executive director of a new nonprofit called Equal Access California. So we've been deploying free public Wi-Fi for equal access and disaster preparedness. So downtown Guerneville has it, we just did Cazadero, Bodega, and Bodega Bay. Forest Hills coming up next, along with Margarita and Jenner. So Jenner is definitely happening. And we include Starlink with solar power and battery backup. So our networks, once we install this, will operate and there's no power, no Comcast, no Verizon. So it's really focused on disaster preparedness. So thank you. Let's keep open.
My name is Lupita Dominguez and I work with those children's services. I'm here to child care for my I know we're having me. So I'm Sheila Nunez. I am also part of the River to Coast Children's Services here in Guerneville.
And my name is Soledad Figueroa of River to Coast Children's Services and also Russian River Road.
Hi, I'm Nick Thayer. I live in Rio Tinto.
Liz Martin, Bodega Bay Fire. Lonnie King, Bodega Bay.
Brent Goodman, I'm the executive officer of the Sonoma Local Agency Formation Commission. It's a grand title for an obscure but influential agency.
That was a quote from the president, right?
Hi, I'm Jackie Brazil with Forest Hill State Spot. We're trying to get a state market in Forestville.
Hi, I'm Davis. I'm the Drive resident here in Yorkville. Just resident for
Great, I see just a couple more. I want to make sure everyone knows our district team members.
Hi, I'm Leo Chi. I'm Linda's district director for another week before I hand off my responsibilities fully to Trace Lyons. Patiently, thanks.
Hi, I'm Debbie Ramirez, and I am a field representative in Supervisor Huffman's office.
And once more, you
Thank goodness Debbie's taken over a lot of that representatives. I just want to say how happy I am to have, for you to have done this, because I'm sitting here going, Craig, I'm so happy to meet you in person. You need to talk to him. At least I talked to him, it's just recognized so many names, and it's wonderful to see your faces. At least Wyland program manager with Supervisor Hopkins.
Well, do we want to, I think we should continue and have an open discussion that we agreed, full group. So can we move on to number 2? What do you all feel are the most important services that we should be addressing in this study? You want to get going on that, given the content of the presentations? So let's get started.
Howdy. I would really like to see roads. Did I mention bridges as well?
be addressed. I think it's really important, and also wastewater solutions. We're really at a crisis point. I love all the work that's being done on emergency services. I have a concern that what we're talking about is shunting problems that have been ignored for years by the Board of Supervisors in our small communities here, down to the people that are stuck with them. And I understand that, but I also think that it's important that we have some sort of responsibility acknowledged on the part of Board of Supervisors to really look at how this can either be fixed as a problem or really support this being a successful solution. Because my concern is that there's a very small group of people in this community that are very active, including Brian, including you, Linda, thank you. But including Rich and Roberto, we're all working very hard to create solutions, but I'm not sure that shunting it down when it's in as poor condition as it is now makes a lot of sense.
I think that's an excellent point. And one thing that I want to mention, when the county and the city of Santa Rosa move forward with the Roseland annexation, and an annexation is different than an incorporation, but just as a for example, Roseland had been disinvested in for decades, right? There had been no attention paid to the sidewalks, to the street. And so the county of Sonoma actually had to pay tens of millions of dollars to the city of Santa Rosa in order for that to sort of be come up to city standards. And that's not kind of the way that incorporation law currently works, but I think that there might be a conversation to be had with the state legislature. But I absolutely hear what you say, which is it's not fair for the county to pass the liability down to locals and say, oh, we're gonna wash our hands and now it's your problem, and that leads to permanent concern over rising tax rates. So what I'm hearing in terms of concerns are, we don't want liabilities that the county should have addressed 30 years ago, and we don't want to see increased costs on the locals, right?
Yeah, so for me, it's all of them. I'm a huge advocate of local governments. We know our needs, and we know our solutions. So I want to let everyone know, and tell us a lot of people when we meet them. Sonoma County is 1,900 square miles in area. District 5 is the largest district by area. Each district has 98,000 constituents. Linda represents 98,000 people. We represent 7,000. You take Rio Negro, Monterey, and Verneville, 7,000 people. Her, Elise, and her office give us a lot of attention. But there are 92 other thousand people that she needs to take care of, that she needs to represent. So when people give Linda and her office a hard time, it's not right. It's not fair. We represent 5% of her constituents. So how do we solve this problem? We become our own government. We decide our fate. We decide what services need to be addressed, and we fix it, right? This is something that we can do, we know how to do. And so local governments, that's it, right? For me, land use is a huge thing. Land use is really everything. If we want to have a say in our vacation rentals, land use. If we want to develop low-income housing, land use. Actually, economic development, land use. Land use, land use, land use. This is what makes us able to determine not just the next 5 years, but the next 20 years. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Sure.
How would you support some kind of governance issue like that? What kind of tax base
So that's,
looking to support? And what kind of funding would you get to solve some of the things that you're talking about?
so the question is how we do it. But that's not the topic of this workshop, that's the third workshop. So there is actually a plan on how we could afford to pay for each one of the steps, whether it's a CSP or incorporation, right? And there's some discussion, and I'm not, you know, I'm just Mr. Citizen here, but no. Yes. So there. Yeah. So one of the things I'm gonna, this, okay, so there's a thing called TOT that we know and love and hate. Right? So TOT, in 2019.
And TOT stands for?
Oh, sorry.
The
tax.
hotel bed tax that also led to vacation rental.
Yeah. So in 2019, that's the numbers I last looked at, the total receipts for Sonoma County was $48 million. So Sonoma County across 5 districts raised $48 million in TOT receipts. Of that money, 21 million was raised in unincorporated Sonoma County, right? Of that 21 million, we think that Grimville, Rio Nino, Monterey, and maybe down to Fort Bell might be raising 8 to 10 million in revenue. So there's a possibility that we have the revenue base to form the city. And if we can't form a city, then we negotiate with the county. They then take the funds that are being generated locally. We come to an agreement and we say, all right, cool, we're going to be a community service district because maybe the city is a step in the car. But we negotiate at the county and then they return funds to us to operate. So if you're worried about will my property tax go up or will I be levying a parcel tax, I would say most likely no. So I think that a CSP and the city would be dead on arrival if there was a tax increase to any of the residents. Does that answer your question?
Well, here, one of the county, we use so that the community water districts expand. Some family issues on the county too.
Yeah.
So everybody.
I'm gonna let Linda take over some of these county road.
I'll get stuff. There's no.
All right, so we have a couple of other questions and would love to hear from other folks. And I do want to mention that we can do reverse translation. If anyone wants to speak in Spanish, we can make sure that there is translation into English for the residents here. So any of the questions up on the board are fair game. I really would love to hear answers also to number 1. What would you like to know more about? What should we bring information to the next meeting? I heard a loud call for additional financial information, which is part of the plan. And then also curious about how important is local control. And I'm gonna go over here and then I'll come back to you guys. Are you guys ready? Got a question?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So they have a microphone. Because I'm getting involved in the unification study for the school districts, my thought is that school districts are one of those districts that would benefit us in Far West County, all across the county, not just a community. So it's all over the river area up to Fort Ross. And the school districts are separated with the elementary schools, but our high school is unified with the West County High School and Antelope High School. And if this unification study is completed and comes forth as a benefit, then the elementary school districts would unify in the same way that the fire districts would unify, basically, all coming under less administrative overhead. Because administrative overhead is what's killing a lot of these small schools. And they're getting smaller and smaller all the time. So there's so much money put into administration within all these tiny schools, which we can unify and therefore strengthen our schools. With that in mind, that is a possibility of bringing back Amelingo High School for Far West County, because it would be an entire school district if this works. And so my thought is a school district part of this district formations that you're talking about, that with this unification study would be part of?
I think the answer in the short term is no. We're focusing on services that the county is currently delivering for the special districts are delivering, figuring out there's a better, more efficient way to deliver the municipal type services, separate from the schools.
I'll let Mark Ramfit speak, but it's a totally different process, and so he can kind of share that.
I sometimes say this facetiously, and I'm sorry if it comes across that way. One of the joys of being in Laughter is we don't do the school districts. The county office of education actually does have a charter to do studies and to help districts look at consolidation. And so again, I think it's totally separate from this.
I've got a comment here, and then I'll circle back.
Yo solo quiero, donde dice sobre qué le gustaría saber más o comentar.
I only want to address, what would you like to know more about?
Yo tengo 28 años viviendo en esta área y llegué trabajando por 10 años en un hotel y ahora estoy limpiando casas de las que rentan de turismo.
I've been in this area for 28 years. First, I was working at a hotel, and now I clean the houses that are rented for vacation rentals.
Y sé que muchas de las personas hispanas que vivimos aquí cerca lo hacemos.
And I know that us fans that live in this area, that is what we do.
Y mi idea es por qué nosotras las latinas o todas las personas que trabajamos en eso no tenemos como en los restaurantes que nos dejaran una propina de un tanto %.
And I thought it why we do at restaurants and other services for visitors, we get some kind of percentage of the tip for service.
Porque realmente a veces las personas no quieren pagar bien y es un trabajo muy duro y difícil de hacer.
Because sometimes people really don't want to pay well, and it's a hard job. It's a difficult, hard job.
Es todo, gracias.
Thank you, that's all.
So I'm hearing requests for worker support and wage support, which can also be addressed ultimately through local control and the implementation of things like living wage ordinances, and minimum wage ordinances in areas.
Pues yo igualmente con mi compañera, como los tesoritas, somos aquí trabajadores de restaurantes, de té, varios labores que hacen de mano de obra y a veces están un costo muy bajo y no llevamos un dinero para cubrir los gastos.
We basically, many of us work in this type of work that was mentioned in restaurants, in manual labor, and in general, what we get is not enough to support our cost of living.
Okay,
Thank you. That's all.
So again, I think the concerns about the cost of living that Herman raised earlier are really critical, that we don't want to see cost increases going on.
Hola, a lo mejor no viene acá, pero aquí vienen ¿cómo decir? Los que vienen aquí de visita, siempre se parquean y les ponen tickets. Yo pienso que ellos vienen para aportar dinero aquí, no podrían hacer algo como para no ponerles tickets porque ellos vienen a aportar dinero.
She's talking about those who come as visitors and they have to park somewhere, and then they get tickets, and that doesn't seem to her, like, if they come and they support our local economy, but they get tickets, that doesn't seem very visitor friendly.
I just want to go back to the question before about wages and Linda's point about living wage or minimum wage ordinance. We talked a lot about the land use authority that the city would have, but the authority to make a law like a higher minimum wage is also something that a city can do that a CSD or a special district cannot do. So as a general purpose government, the city can make ordinances, make laws. So that's another benefit of incorporation.
My question is around number one, what would you like to know more about? I hear a lot about looking at consolidation is gonna help with service quality, but it's gonna cost money. So in each of these consolidation scenarios, who guides economic development so that we can build an economy that can actually pay for what we want?
The answer is, it depends. If you form a city, it can have an economic development department, and it can raise revenue from whatever source to implement an economic development strategy. But you can also have something called the business improvement district. That's a kind of special district that would levy a charge on businesses or someone else and use that money to invest in economic development, downtown beautification, whatever that district wants. So you can have a focused special district or have that function be part of a community services district that would do that kind of thing.
Thank you. If the community decides to move forward in community services district, I'm wondering if, I guess it's a direction of Mark, right, but whether or not the sphere of influence from the existing district could be expanded to save the startup costs of a brand new district.
Yes, generally the answer is yes. And in fact, LAPCO is bound by the law to look at whether there are neighboring districts that are providing the same services and whether it is more appropriate to expand an existing district rather than scaling it. So we have to do that by law.
Okay, Roberto Stebbins again. I'm concurring a lot with what I'm hearing about employment and fair prices for workers. To me, the issue is what is our vision for this area for the next 10 years? What is really needed? We know we have problems with infrastructure as a top item. We know we have problems with low income to make sure that we don't lose what has always been an affordable base for this community. And I think we need to look at what is really needed to keep this economy growing. And what is our major industry? It's tourism, but it's also agriculture. And how do we get more involved? Quite honestly, we have no connection with the agricultural parts of this county, and I don't see the representative very well either. So to me, there's a real big missing piece of this, of what is happening in our area that is not in building on to the railroad area, because I'm pretty well aware of the urban centers of West County. So I'm just curious of the visioning of where we really want to go, services we want to, that are based on to do with communicating with other stakeholders.
I really love that, and I think that so often we are faced with what is the current crisis or what is the current problem, but the goal really is to get to what is that ideal community, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, which then will guide what are the things that we need in order to get there. Does anyone have a response to any comments, or is there maybe one? Okay, a couple here, there, and then I'll work my way to this.
Thank you. So one question, when you talk about forming a new city, are you just talking about which towns would that be? Is that Burnville, Monterey? Does that include Forestville? Because I kind of feel like Forestville is maybe its own little pocket with Brighton and Rio Negro, but I don't know. And then the other thing I'm interested in is definitely combining those 3 or 4 parks in Forestville, and maybe doing a, what do we call it, like a consolidated and expanded, district with also water and river water, however that would.
Because you have
I just want to say a few words about sewer. You heard that, the price is going up to 2,000 a year. And part of the problem is that the system is getting old, it's deteriorating. It needs a huge amount of repairs. The repairs estimate is $50 million just for basic repairs and won't cover everything. The county has been successful to obtain most of that money, I believe, in grants, which could change in the future depending on politics, really, and who's in office at the federal level, especially. And it's really hard to compare our area to a place like Santa Rosa and say, if you have more people hooked up, it'll be cheaper. Because we have a very complex environment. We have problems in our environment that they don't have. We have, for instance, 11 pump stations on our system, whereas the whole 40-mile Kaiser system has 5. And we need all these pump stations. We are in a floodplain. We have major spills whenever there's a major flood. We have raw sewage in the streets, and that's why we need so many repairs. And I'm just real concerned that people are thinking about incorporation. That means taking over this whole mess. And even if you look up other communities, the problem could get worse or at least stay the same. It's unlikely to get cheaper because regulations keep changing. On top of it, there are a lot of toxins in our environment that are not regulated, that may be regulated in the future, and that always has cost. So I just wanted to throw that information in the mix to give you something to think about.
Can I quickly just answer one question that came up? Jackie was asking about, could we have one town for Forestville, one town for Rio Nito, one town for Burnville? That's not really possible. You need to have a certain size in order for that to work. So there would need to be some consolidation if you were incorporating across into a town.
So the other thing I'd add to that is whatever like the token comes out of this process is actually there's a solution to Forestville. And then there's a solution for Granito, Burnville, Montreal. So there, even though we're neighboring communities, we're different. Right? And there's no way you can have an infrastructure government.
Good. You know, I think we can all agree that this ain't gonna happen, right? What I'd like to know more about are what are the responsibilities that this municipality or CSD take on. I mean, Brenda kind of touched on it a little bit, you know, the community would have to take on the legal responsibility for environmental compliance. You know, we need a lead agency under the California Environmental Quality Act. Do we have the guns to do that? You know, is there any, well, I don't know that.
I can hear you.
But you know, you don't have a city without a city attorney, right? You know, so I mean, what are the responsibilities, let alone the finances? What are the responsibilities that the CSD or the municipality would take on? And do we have the guns to do that?
I think that Matt can provide a little bit of an answer to that question. And, you know, community services districts actually are more of an opt-in model. So you can actually have a little bit more of a menu of what responsibilities you choose to assume. A city is a city and it kind of comes with the whole enchilada like that.
Yeah, she did a great job explaining that, a ton to add. But there is a big point of the city. I think that's important. For example, you're the lead agency for CEQA for any land use project that you come along. If you're a CSD and you're just doing parks and downtown beautification and whatever else is added, there's a much lower level of responsibility and cost as well. CSDs can do everything that the city can do except make laws and control areas. But yes, they can do law enforcement, they can do fire, they can do parks, they can do roads, they can do downtown beautification, they can do water and wastewater, all those things.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about, hold it up to, yeah, that's, I have to swallow the mic. I'm really happy that we're going to be looking into fiscal issues in the next meeting. And what I'm really interested in is looking at what agencies we have in place now, like Sweetwater Springs, et cetera. What are the budgets? What are the responsibilities of those agencies? And how much of those budgets are administrative, the kinds of things that could be consolidated, and how much time? And I'd also like to know what kind of money is coming from the county outside of those agencies? Because I know most of those agencies have, get grants, and some of them have, we have things that come from the county too. So if it can somehow be presented in some way, we can deal with this, to what's currently happening and what would go away if we change the governance structure, that would be a lot more helpful.
If you like spreadsheets, you're gonna like the next meeting, because that is really sort of the intent, is to bring much of that information forward, including what is the county spending on sheriff services for this area, right? What are we spending on roads? How much TOT is being generated? I don't know if you want to add anything about kind of other things that information that you guys will bring to the table at the next meeting.
Once again, we're gonna cover it very well, but yes, that is precisely the kind of analysis that we're gonna bring to you at the next meeting. We wanted to focus at this meeting on what questions do you all have, and what are the possible governance solutions, and then put the sort of, don't worry about what we can afford right now. Let's think about what we, and we'll look at what the money is going forward, and how much money we're generating.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that, the devil's in the details here. It's easy as, we get involved in this kind of process to start jumping to, okay, this is the solution, or this is what we want to do. But these are very critical, important functions that need to be maintained in this area. And consequently, we need to look at whatever solution comes up. Are they going to be able to adequately provide the service that's actually going to be an improvement? How are those services going to be provided? And the big one, what's it all going to cost? I'm hoping this gets addressed in the study. I don't know, I tend to be disappointed in studies. That's my own thing. The costs are extremely important. And that needs to be really delineated. And if you're going to have a city, how do you provide planning functions? How do you do a general plan? How much is that going to cost? And that's just one thing. The city has numerous things that need to be looked at. The same if a special district is expanded or consolidated. Part of it is maintaining the focus of what that district was in the first place. An example, our parks, we actually have pretty good little parks out here. We have a great park system. How do we maintain it and improve that? Our water, we took over, Sweetwater Springs took over from Citizens Utilities, if y'all remember those days. And basically, we bought a piece of junk. We have spent millions and millions of dollars since the 1980s improving our water system. We need to maintain that focus. We're not done yet, folks. And then this area here is served by a completely different water system. Do we bring that in? What does it cost for that? What kind of conditions is it in? All of these are the answers I hope to get out of this kind of study. They're critical in making a decision. And it is critical to what we ultimately end up paying.
Great, coming over to this, oh, sorry, and then, yeah.
So just one data point. We're talking a lot about what's possible with about $8 to $10 million perhaps in a population of about 7,000 roughly. And there's no such thing as a pure apples to apples comparison, but not too far away, the city's Bethel has a budget of approximately $9 or $10 million, and they serve about 7,000 to 8,000 people. So again, it's a very different type of area. However, I just think in terms of thinking what's perhaps practical, actually happening on the ground with that amount of money, that amount of people, might be useful to look at their personnel structure they have. For example, there's city manager, there's also the city attorney. Anyway, it's the type of thing that we might be able to look at a practical level now and say, that's at least one representation of what we're facing here.
Okay. My concerns are, the questions are, number 3 and number 4. How concerned are you about potential risks? And how important is local control? So one of the benefits that the Lower River Map, when it was formed, was that it was a much larger district than we ever asked for a municipal advisory council. When Forestville tried to do one by itself, it was rejected by the Board of Supervisors. When Linda came along and said, let's do the entire Lower Russian River area, it was accepted by the Board of Supervisors. And I think one of the reasons why is because we have common goals and common needs and common problems. And so when we look at these districts, if we look at them in the Lower Russian River area as combined problems and issues that need resolution, I think we have a better opportunity to solve them. So I like the idea of combining existing districts, which is easier than starting new ones. And then also the concept of the incorporation thing seems like it's so far-fetched with the 2011 laws, etc. Let's start by reducing our personal risks, reducing the need for volunteers and official elected people, because those sound pretty risky. And combining these districts, my biggest concern about one of the things that you said, Brian, about the incorporation was looking at the TOT taxes. That puts a tremendous pressure on our communities to have things like vacation rentals and hotels and restaurants that bring those TOT taxes into our community, and therefore it becomes even more dependent upon the tourism industry. And right now we're losing way too much housing, affordable housing, etc. When you look at the housing element, which is going, another meeting is happening next week before it gets finalized and before sent to the Board of Supervisors, affordable housing is huge, and that impacts workforce housing, which impacts wages. And as you keep pushing a dependence on the tourism industry for our survival, you're putting us all at risk. And I'm concerned that all of us become at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. So, just to address the TOT issue, we're already at TOT dollars. All of your fifth grants, TOT. All of the sixth grants, TOT. So, whether or not we like it, vacation rental and tourism is part of our economy, right? The key is not to get rid of it. The key is to manage it and make it work for us, right? We have no say. You know, the Board of Supervisors today are recently passed, you know, some ordinances for vacation rentals. So it's better for us to control how we want it. Now, getting into kind of like the cost, let's say, for example, you know, it is $8 to $10 million in revenue that the city could have with 7,000 people, right? And then you add in a little bit more of the sales tax, a little bit more of the property tax, which by the way is up 6%, Sonoma County wide on average. So now let's say it's actually around 12 that would come in. Well, how do you want to look at this from a financial standpoint? It's per capita expenditures. So that's kind of what it's going to say. So per capita expenditures. So right now, per capita expenditures, how much is spent on each person, right? So how much is spent by the county on you, on me? So what the next workshop should show is what is the county spending on me right now? Right? Well, if you go to Vernon, or if you go to other cities, their per capita expenditure is $1,000, right? So if you took the amount of money that you potentially generate by the population that you would have, you get a per capita expenditure of about $1,500. $1,300 per person is a lot of money. You can go to the Secretary of the Controller's office. It's a California agency. You can look up every city You can look at their per capita expenditure based on population. There are two cities, Boltville and Escalon. Both of them are private. Both of them have infrastructure, both of them have sewage, both of them just repaved all of their roads. So the key to look at this is everyone's absolutely right. Is there revenue? If there is revenue, can we afford it? It's very simple. It's like running a business, right? You need to know if you're in a restaurant, you need to know how much your plate of food is costing. So if we have money, is the per capita expenditure is there, then why not? I mean, everyone complains there's no police, right? There's no trash. There, you look at, urban locals, you just talk about like the challenges we're faced. Why can't we fix that? That's all I'm asking.
So Brian's exactly right. That kind of data is available. At the next meeting, we're going to present a spreadsheet Linda talked about, which will show you what the county is currently spending in this community and what revenues are being generated. We can go through it in as much detail as the community would like. So there's lots of detail we'll provide this time.
And, I also want to acknowledge, Vesta's comments. I know that has really come into question over possible incorporations in the past, which is, do you sort of create an incentive for development? And actually thinking back to our Bodega Bay example, a friend of mine entirely jokingly, but I said, you need to stop saying that, said, the one way that we can actually get fire services out in Bodega Bay, we need an IKEA or we need a casino. And then, and it's like, that would because they generate huge amounts of revenue, right? To then be able to invest it into services. And I'm like, don't say that too loudly, because no one wants to see that on the coast. But you need to sort of have obviously confidence in your local leadership and, a sense of community identity and planning about what is, again, that vision for the future that came up earlier.
I was intrigued by the idea that came up earlier about getting all the boards and leadership groups into one room on a quarterly basis. Who would provide the lead on that? Is my question. And also, I was also intrigued by the idea of strengthening the MAC, not as a member of the MAC, but just as a governing body. And what kind of money might the board throw at that to allocate to the community?
That is always a question for the majority of the Board of Supervisors. But one of the challenges with the MAC is that statutorily, it can always only be an advisory role. That said, I am looking to the guidance of both of our municipal advisory councils on how to allocate that, $4 million in budget this year. And so I'm very interested in how we can better position and empower the MAC. One thing that I want to mention, because it hasn't come up yet, is one other benefit of being a city that I certainly witness on a regular basis. I serve on, half a dozen different boards and commissions. And in order to serve on those boards and commissions, you have to either be a supervisor or a city council member. And so for a long time, I was not able to serve because of lack of seniority, because I had just been elected on the Sonoma County Transportation Authority or the Regional Climate Protection Authority. So for all, West County, the only spokesperson was from the city of Sebastopol, and they weren't thinking about Greenville, they weren't thinking about the coast, they weren't thinking about Oxnard, they were thinking about Sebastopol because that's their jurisdiction. And those kinds of bodies, hundreds of millions of dollars flow through those bodies. And if you don't, the saying goes, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And so, there really isn't someone there to advocate for the needs of the lower Russian River, unless it's me. And then I'm also having to think about, yes, I'm fighting for the river, and I'm fighting for Oxnard, and I'm fighting for the coast, right? Because, I'm pulled in a lot of different ways, as Brian said earlier. So I do want to mention that in addition to the lawmaking authority, which Matt brought up, the ability to set up a minimum wage, you also have the ability to serve on regional bodies through which funding flows. And again, you could then hire a city grant writer who could help pull in the state and federal funds. Right now, your unincorporated town grant writer is Elise Wyland, and she is phenomenal at it, but she is not sleeping as much as she should because she's trying to pursue a ton of different grant funding opportunities to try to bring money in locally. And again, we're then left with the alphabet soup of agencies, who is going to actually then implement the grant, even if we bring in the money. Sometimes the departments say, I don't have time for that, even though the community wants it and have the money. So I did want to mention that as one additional benefit of city government.
Linda, I'm just looking at the clock here, and I want to make sure we have time for one last activity. So maybe we can take 2 more questions and then move to that.
Last one, okay, hand raised, one more. Okay, do you have?
I think there are a lot of people here that are very focused on the double details, and I'm just a little concerned at the next meeting. If we arrive here and that's the first time we get any look at the data, it's so critical, it's not going to be as productive. So if there is a practical way for us to get information before the next meeting, I would be very grateful and I would spend the time to look at it.
That is actually one of the reasons we didn't have the data at this meeting, because we actually want to post it publicly ahead of time and email out to everyone who has attended the meetings, so that you essentially have that agenda packet before you show up here, because it's impossible to digest the amount of data that they are generating in a 2-hour meeting. So that's safe to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then last comment.
My name is Eva Williams, and I serve on the Fire Safety Kernville Board, living in the local area since 1995. I just want to comment about the caliber of the people that are in the room today and the representation on all the different boards. It's amazing. So I do want to reiterate what you said about the roads. I see all these other roads that are getting repaved, and we have a disaster out here. And we're working hard to develop a fire-wise community, and we're working with our community to educate people on fire safety and disaster preparedness and everything like that. But when I see the idea of trying to form a whole new city, when we barked up so many different trees with our roads, and the ability for us to be able to get out and have our residents be safe. I just wanted to comment that for me, the priority right now is roads.
So, first of all, I'm going to second that. I'm really impressed with all of the comments we heard today and at the last meeting as well. In fact, in all the outreach we've done in this community, really impressed me with your knowledge and your commitment to this region. So thank you all so much for coming and participating. We will post these questions on the Rivermap webpage and provide a way for you to ask questions and post your comments and make sure that your thoughts are included in our study and in the outreach we're doing. So this is not your last opportunity. And in fact, the last thing we want to do is we did a quick survey. So hopefully you all got on the Wi-Fi when you got here. Peter will put up the page where you can log onto the Wi-Fi and take our quick survey if you like. We'll get the results in real time so we can do it, but at least people in this room think about what's going on. Okay, so there's the Wi-Fi network, GNVL guest, and the password is guest 0723 exclamation point. And then you can either use the scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and use that code at the top, 6156-7521. We'll give you 1 more minute to get on the Wi-Fi and move to the next question.
And there are the results from the first question.
Yes, so there are results from the first question right there. So far, it's still time to add your thoughts to this.
Fail.
Are people having problems getting the Wi-Fi?
They're coming in.
We were certainly able to do it up here at the front of the room. There's also 2 networks. One is called guest and one is called something else. The first one is contact or something. That's not the one you want. You want the one called guest.
They're flying. Yeah.
No.
We're getting.
The password's up there. Yes, with a capital G, 070723 exclamation mark.
Okay.
The website is menti.com, menti.com, and then you have to enter that code if you can't scan this.
Every time the words move, you can see someone successfully answer.
I keep getting, entering information and it's, great example of internet.
For the Wi-Fi or for the server? We're not advancing to the next question until everyone's got on the Wi-Fi and is able to do this.
You want 3 words, then. The survey says 3 words.
You can enter up to 3 words. Okay, I think most people have now been able to get on the Wi-Fi. Does anyone still need another minute to get on the Wi-Fi and get to the survey page? Raise your hand if you want one more second. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next question. This one is, what do you think about current service delivery in Lower Russian River? Your choices are dramatic change or build on what we have. All right, the incrementalists are pulling ahead. Where's Brian? It doesn't happen. Okay, I Brian just all your responses are confidential except for Brian's. Okay, is anyone else wanting to vote or still having trouble? Raise your hand if you need one more second. Okay, now hands are up. Let's go on to the next.
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rush you. Is it too embarrassing? Do you want to like wink at me if you need help with the Wi-Fi?
Oh, you
Okay.
got the Wi-Fi?
All right.
Well, let's see.
So this is a question on how important is local control versus minimizing risk. These are obviously the main trade-offs in terms of how far you go to the right in the continuum we talked about before with, more services in a CFP or a incorporation being more local control, but also pretty close at this point.
Settings to like the Wi-Fi. Oh, okay. She's not getting it wrong. Give us the help here, will you? Oh, yeah. Cut you off from doing it twice. Go ahead.
All right, we'll also post it on the website if people have a chance to participate again, rather than move on to the next question.
I got it too. I have an Android. Yeah, I'm not sure, but you said.
Just have more of with Peter, it's his laptop. Yeah. I think it's- Okay, so this is a question about what you all are looking to do to try to make it ever this solution happen. So to improve local governance, I would be willing to help collect signatures. Mark's going to demand signatures on your petition. Raise money. You're going to have to hire consultants and lawyers and people to draw maps and community organizing maybe. Do some community organizing. So a couple questions up here. Who runs this? Who makes this happen? Well, you guys do. At least if you're willing to vote on that. And then lastly, run for office. So whenever district is formed or new city is formed, we'll have a board of directors or a city council and that's elected representatives. Linda already has a job, so she's not going to do it. So let's ask her.
She said, no, I feel no worry.
Oh, wait.
Does anyone else want to register a response on this one? Doesn't look like everyone's made an entry yet. All right, one more. We don't have a lot of running for office up there. This is in the Charlie's primary. Okay, and then this is just to get a sense about which services are most important. This is just who's in the room. And obviously, you guys are community leaders, but it's up to the whole community to decide. But definitely interested in what this group thinks. It's like roads is. Oh, yeah. It certainly looks like go so that can someone voting multiple times. But land use is also very important.
Everything's important.
Well, of course, it's all important, but trade-offs perhaps have to be made.
Yes.
So the helping prioritize it. Okay, I think, oh, there's one more. Okay, one more question. Okay, so do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The Lower Russian River has lots of strong leaders, and county officials care about the interests of the Lower Russian River. So I guess when I say county officials here, let's say excluding those people currently in the room. That's not really what we're talking about. But you know, right now the county controls their destiny, and getting some of that back is what this is all about.
You could phrase it as the board of supervisors.
That might be a better way to put it. Brian says the board of supervisors. So, but there's also building officials and all kinds of other people. So it's really a question about whether you're willing to, how willing you are to let someone else control your destiny, but also how much do you trust yourself to govern yourselves. Okay, well, that's kind of the last question we did this survey, and we'll make sure to post it on the website, and we'll share the results as part of our report and information that we distribute next time in conjunction with the last workshop. But I really want to thank all of you for coming and spending your Saturday here. It's so important to have this kind of leadership and interest in the community. The job we're trying to do, and also Brian Hopkins and her team, that couldn't be done without all of you helping us collect information and get it. So thank you so much.
You want to talk about
Thank you, Richard. Just quickly that we're gonna have another community meeting, which I've mentioned probably in a couple months. We'll share the financial information in advance of that, and that will have some more specifics about the kind of solutions that seem viable based on what's come up in the community engagement process. And then we'll final report it. I think at least we'll add something to that.
I asked for the last slide because a lot of it is going to be done by me in our office. And that is that obviously these big group meetings are insufficient for these big topics. And so what we're going to be doing in between this community meeting and the next is going out to you. So Friends of Rio Nito, the CAG, the Monterey Rec and Park, you know, all of the different organizations that are out there, the nonprofits that are out there, the Chamber of Commerce that's out here. We asked you to invite us to come to your meetings, and we will send somebody, probably me, maybe somebody else. We'll see how the timing works. And we'll talk through some of these things. We'll ask questions. We'll figure out where there are gaps in knowledge. We'll come and talk to your constituents. There are so many leaders in this room, each have different groups and organizations. So it's really time for us to start spreading the education out to all the different places we can. And then as we said, we're going to be working on the financial analysis and bringing that to the next meeting. But in the meantime, we're going to have a lot of small community conversations, and we're not going to have the third meeting until we've had those. meetings. We also have, on the website, we also will post this information, this workshop. We'll post information as we get it. We'll post financial information when we have that ready. People will be able to respond on the website to these questions. And so there's going to be a lot of work going between this meeting and the next. And then after the next meeting where we provide the financials, it's going to be the end of the study. And these guys work, but it's just the beginning for the rest of us. It's just the beginning for us to say, what do we do now that we've shared this information and we've gotten this information in? And there was a hand there. Did we answer your question?
Yeah, if I threw a happy hour in my neighborhood.
Oh, I'd love to come to a happy hour. Ah. Yes, no, that's exactly it, which is bring together groups of people so that we can come and bring this information to people.
Necessarily see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking, if we, threw a happy hour up on Right Drive and got, say, 10 people, make it worth your while, are you available to come have a chat?
Absolutely.
If you throw a party, we'll be there.
And we can talk to you about what questions we want to have answered too. So we'll work with you on the content and try to be able to answer more people's questions.
So would that include going to a Safer West County meeting when they have their meetings?
Yep. Yep, any group that gets together a group of people that we can come and talk with about this process would be super wonderful. And please take food. Take food home to your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And if you could bring a chair over and help us hang it up, that would really help us.